Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzales here in studio with our good friend Chris Pinto. And the question that we're going to be discussing today is, how pervasive is the Jesuit influence? I think you're going to be surprised, so stick around. Welcome back. We do have Chris Pinto in studio, and we're going to get to Chris here in a minute. We just want to remind you of a couple items that are on the agenda, and hopefully you can join us for those. The first is our October 9th through 12th conference right close to here in Norman, Oklahoma. It's going to be a great time, over 20 speakers. As you know, it's just wonderful to sit around and sit with people who are like-minded as it relates to prophecy. There is so much happening right now in the world, and there's going to be plenty of updates as we get to this conference in October. Again, go to prophecywatchers.com. You can check it out. You can also live stream if you can't be there in person. That's another way to sit back and enjoy at your leisure all the different gifted speakers that are going to be there. Another thing that we are doing is I'm going to be joining Billy Crone on a missionary of Paul trip, also in October. So if you want to get information about that, it's going to be a great time. Athens, we're going to go down into Alexandria, down even into Egypt to see the pyramids, as well as Cyprus and other spots that Paul joined just in the book of Acts. It's pretty amazing. So you go to prophecywatchers.com, look at the events tab, scroll down, and you can see the brochure that describes all the different itinerary. It's going to be quite phenomenal. So join us on that as well. Well, Chris, welcome.
Well, Mondo, great to be back with you.
Yeah, it's man, a lot is happening, and it seems perfect timing to have you back here. And I mean, we did some videos a while ago, or some programs on this, but here your DVD, American Jesuits: A History of Jesuitism in the United States. And right out of the gate, you know, there's a lot of conspiracy-minded or things out there, and it can go both ways. But kind of what led you to produce, again, a phenomenal documentary, very in-depth, very detailed, evidence, overwhelming. What kind of led you to this?
Well, I had talked about the Jesuits in an earlier film called A Lamp in the Dark, The Untold History of the Bible, when we talk about not only the history of the Bible and the Reformation, but then the Counter-Reformation, because this is what they're known for. And the Counter-Reformation, I believe, is what ultimately led to modern higher criticism, where people undermine the authority of the Bible. It ultimately led to secular humanism, led to the teachings of social justice, socialism, and communism. And the remarkable thing that we show in the film is that 19th century ministers, both Protestant ministers and some Catholic, acknowledged that the Jesuits were behind the development of Marxism and what was sometimes called militant atheism as a weapon not only against Protestants, but also against their fellow Catholics who were resisting them and had kicked them out of their countries dozens of times. And in fact, it was Catholic leaders who rose up in 1773 and petitioned the Pope to abolish the order, which he did. Pope Clement abolished the order in 1773, and then they poisoned him a year later. So they were known for being very subversive. They're really a network of spies, assassins, but they pose as educators and so on. And we show all of this in the film and we document it. But their development of socialism, communism, and what is today called globalism, they openly admit that they're the authors of modern globalization through Georgetown University, which is their headquarters here in the United States. Wow. So what got me to actually make the film was I would talk about some of these things on my radio program, and I had several of our listeners sending me all kinds of materials from the 19th century.
Did you know? Right, I imagine.
I knew part of it, but there were hundreds of books, pamphlets, sermons, all kinds of material from our Christian ancestors back in the 1800s warning about the infiltration of Rome and the Jesuit order in particular in the United States of America. And there were so many warnings, and I was kind of, overwhelmed by it. The guy knew about it. I just didn't realize it was so extensive as it was. And then when COVID happened, and I stumbled on a video, how Dr. Fauci's Jesuit training prepared him for COVID-19.
Probably in a positive way, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Back then it was all positive. And I thought, he's a Jesuit. You got to be kidding. So then I said, okay, we've got to do something. And so I began to work on American Jesuits.
So for the sake of many of you might be hearing this and you might have heard about different things and Jesuits and this and that and connections with Catholicism. But for those that really don't know much, what is a Jesuit? What's the connection there? Give us a snippet of what that even means.
Well, it's a specific order within the Roman Catholic Church that was commissioned in the year 1540 by Pope Paul III with a former Spanish soldier named Ignatius Loyola from Spain. He was injured in battle, could no longer continue his military career, so he became a priest. And he became fascinated with really the Inquisition and the Dominicans. And he wanted to found an order of priests that was similar. So he started what was called the Society of Jesus.
Okay.
And they had these, or he had early on, very militant, inquisitional type ideas. But he believed the problem that was happening with the Reformation, because the Reformation had been going for years at that point. He's about 1535, 36, right in there. And he believed that the problem was a lack of obedience to the papacy and the hierarchy in Rome. And then he's commissioned by Pope Paul III in 1540 to launch the Counter-Reformation, to overturn the Protestant Reformation. So Jesuits that term was developed as a criticism originally, because these priests were seen as wolves in sheep's clothing, that they're only using the name Jesus as a pretense for a deceptive agenda that they have. And that's how they're known. But what they did is they embraced the term Jesuit, and that's how they're called today.
And so the movement began in Europe, and then talk about how it came and basically infiltrated in the United States, and how there was warnings by early founding fathers to have that, basically to resist and to be aware of this infiltration.
Yeah, we opened the film with a quote from one of our founders, Governor John Winthrop, who was a Puritan. And Governor Winthrop gave as the number one reason for the Puritan migration to America, he said, was to preach the gospel in the New World and to establish a bulwark against the kingdom of Antichrist that the Jesuits labored to rear up in these parts. And
they saw it, they kind of saw it already happening in Europe, right?
Oh, sure.
And so they're coming over here and saying, okay, we have this, now we can start fresh, have some freedom,
right?
Kind of as a bulwark against any of what was happening in the European continent.
Right. Well, there were already Jesuit missionaries that were in parts of North America.
Okay.
And they wanted to claim this territory for Rome.
Okay.
But of course, England knew that it's just going to be an extension of the Inquisition. And of course, they compromised the gospel. So they saw this as a contention that England and Protestantism and the principles of freedom need to govern the New World. That was literally their view, the Puritan view. And of course, they were very, very determined. I love the Puritans. I'm a big fan. But they saw themselves opposing the corruption of Rome and the Jesuit order, as they saw them as an antichrist order of priests.
Wow. I mean, this is, to me, I find it fascinating, again, to see that history that is there, like concurrently there, you have two groups seeking to establish, hegemony in the New World, in this area.
Yeah.
And the war hasn't, well, I want to get to that in a minute, because we're going to see how that war hasn't stopped. But we're going to take a little break here, where you can see how to get our magazine, which again, the goal of the magazine is to keep you updated every single month. As you know, things are happening really, really fast right now. And we not only do we have current events, but we have topics as well, biblical topics, theological topics, which will be are very interesting.
The world is unraveling right in front of us. Wars, pandemics, economic collapse, artificial intelligence, global surveillance. Things are changing quickly, but you don't have to be caught off guard. At Prophecy Watchers, we believe that God has called us to be a voice in these last days, to warn you of things to come, to educate you on the study of Bible prophecy, and to boldly proclaim the soon return of Jesus. Today, we're inviting you to be a part of our mission through our monthly publication. The Prophecy Watcher isn't just a magazine, it's your trusted news source for the end times, the place tens of thousands of people rely on for their end time news. For your gift of just $50 or more, here's what we'd love to send you. 12 monthly issues of our 4-color magazine, The Prophecy Watcher, in your choice of print or digital, plus 5 bonus DVDs packed with eye-opening teachings from prophecy experts, including The Mystery of the Rapture, The Great Apostasy and the Revealing of the Antichrist, Holy Fire in Jerusalem, new shocking discoveries surrounding the Shroud of Turin, The Stones Cry Out, the archaeological evidence for Jesus, The Mystery of the 10 Kings. Could these be the wealthy and influential oligarchs who control our world today? As an added bonus, we want to send you a one-of-a-kind prophetic treasure, a book that examines every prophecy in the entire Bible. Exploring Bible prophecy from Genesis to Revelation is the work of 2 prophecy legends, Tim LaHaye and Ed Hindson. It's a book you'll find on the shelf of every prophecy expert. This 560-page masterpiece is our bonus gift to you. Every page of the Prophecy Watcher magazine is loaded with answers to the questions you've been asking. The rise of the Antichrist system, the Nephilim of Genesis 6, and the real reason for Noah's flood. The shocking truth about UFOs and government cover-ups. Jewish plans for the Third Temple. The World Economic Forum. The 2030 Global Reset and digital currency. The coming wars of Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Dead Sea Scrolls and their secrets to ancient prophecies. This $120 value can be yours for your gift of $50 with shipping included in the USA. Call us at the number on your screen or visit us online at prophecywatchers.tv. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees do apply and all prices listed are in US dollars. The signs are everywhere. The prophetic puzzle is almost complete. And yet, so many are still asleep. That's why the Prophecy Watchers exists, to shine a light in the darkness and help believers understand the lateness of the hour. We believe Jesus is coming soon, and your support helps us take this urgent message to the ends of the earth.
Well, welcome back. We're talking to Chris Pinto about his new DVD, American Jesuits. And Chris, before the break, we simply just talking about how the United States, you have this basically power struggle now and warnings. But would you say that, how did that work out in the sense for the Jesuits that they obviously, were they winning? Did they win that battle?
Well, I would say no. No, they did not win. The climax of the battle over in Europe was the 30 Years' War. That was the big climax. And that's where the Vatican and the Jesuits had their Catholic League, as it was called, and they tried to stamp out Protestantism by force. About 8 million people were killed over a period of 30 years. But ultimately, the Protestant armies prevailed. And that led to the Peace of Westphalia, which is very important to us today. Because the Peace of Westphalia, see, the Pope wanted to be like the king over all of Western Europe. So he wanted Western Europe unified as the Holy Roman Empire under his authority. And that's what the Jesuits wanted. But the countries of Europe did not want that. They wanted to be individual sovereign nations. So that's what the Peace of Westphalia declared, national sovereignty, that each of these countries will be independent, they're going to have their own leaders, and they make their own laws and policies, etc. So that's the Peace of Westphalia, 1648. Fast forward to modern times, open borders is admittedly a refutation of the Peace of Westphalia. In fact, when Tony Blair was Prime Minister of England, there was even an article published back in the 90s saying that he gave a speech that would usher in an end to the Westphalian world order.
Wow.
So they know what they're doing over there in Europe. And that leads to open borders. And so you've got all these immigrants that are being brought in to undermine the Christian populations. And of course, I believe, we interviewed Dr. Ronald Cook in the film, and he believes, and I agree with him, that Rome is using, and the elites are using, a system called irredentism, which is immigration warfare, to infiltrate all these different countries, to ultimately overturn their systems of government and bring them into a single body eventually. They're not there yet, but that's where they're headed. And so very, very interesting. So the Peace of Westphalia, 1648, that declared national sovereignty for the countries of the world. The New World Order is in part a rejection of the Westphalian world order system. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it matters today, because that's what they're doing. And the Vatican and the Jesuit order are very, very involved in this, both over in Europe and especially here in the United States. Like you and I were talking earlier, I don't know if you want to go into this now or wait, but talking earlier about this agreement between the Catholic bishops of America and the Catholic bishops of Mexico that had a document, they still do, called Strangers No Longer, Together on a Journey of Hope. And it's
about what year was this?
2003.
Okay, so this is the important thing, because I want to ask Chris about, we know Francis was a Jesuit, a part of that order, and then what about the new Pope? And so there are so many things that are happening right now in the current times, which I think are relevant. So let's talk about that.
So this document from 2003 called Strangers No Longer literally is a statement of purpose between the Catholic bishops of America, and people can look this up online. It's not a conspiracy theory, but their agreement that they're going to facilitate the mass importation of immigrants from Mexico and these other Latin American countries into the United States. And they're making all of the arguments that we hear from the left, things like separating families, et cetera. All of those arguments were made in this document. And they're admitting, it's almost like hidden in plain sight.
And what's their purpose for this mass, stated these mass migrations? What's their purpose?
Well, I believe they want to get control of the United States of America. I think they want absolute control of our country.
Talk about Leo. People probably want to know about Leo the 14th. Does he have any connections to any of this?
Oh, yeah. In fact, the Jesuits have an article in their America magazine that they published recently, and it's on Leo the 14th. It says, Leo the 14th, an American Pope for the end of American empire, ? Right? And that title in itself I find very, very interesting, especially with all of the riots going on in Los Angeles and the claims now by Mexican leaders that they want the borders from back in 1830. They basically want a reconquista. They want to reconquer Texas, California, and these other territories, which I believe all of that points to Rome. But Pope Leo the 14th is named in part from Pope Leo the 13th, who was Pope back in the 19th century.
And they do this, just so you know, that when a pope comes in, he's got his real name, his birth name, and then they pick a name in order to connect with their ideology. And so the 13th, he was known for this, so I want to be the 14th because I want a connection to that and to continue their thinking and their philosophy and their agendas. I mean, and that's really, just the name itself shows you a lot of what their mindset is.
Oh, yeah. And what you just said is something that they admit in Catholic writings and articles and so on. So they fully admit that they chose the name Leo the 14th because they wanted people to see him as a successor of Leo the 13th. Well, Leo the 13th was educated by a Jesuit priest named Luigi Tapparelli. Tapparelli is known for being the one who originally coined the phrase social justice. That's where the phrase social justice comes from. It comes from a Jesuit back in 1843. Well, Tapparelli was a professor and he taught the young priest who became Pope Leo the 13th. And Pope Leo the 13th published his encyclical called Rerum Novarum. Now, if you go read modern articles on Rerum Novarum, they try to argue that it's somehow a refutation of socialism, but that's not what earlier historians have said. Earlier historians have said that it's really like the Vatican's version of Das Kapital, that's what it is, that it's like Marxism sprinkled with holy water, that's basically what Rerum Novarum is. And that's the foundation of what's called Catholic social teaching. Well, if you were to go online and go to listen to some of the Catholic bishops down on the Mexican border, they justify illegal immigration into our country because that's part of Catholic social teaching. That's what they say. They will literally tell you that directly. And social justice, I think, is important to understand, because what Taparelli was doing was reviving the teachings of Thomas Aquinas, who was part of the Inquisition, and he taught the doctrine of justifiable theft, that it's okay to steal from your neighbor as long as you steal for a good reason. And he had all these different teachings. I sometimes call him the patron saint of kleptomaniacs. That's kind of jokingly, but nevertheless, he did have a whole series of teachings on why it was justifiable to steal under different circumstances. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so that's really the inner doctrine of social justice. And you think about what they're doing, they're justifying this mass importation of all these illegals because they say, well, it's justifiable because these people want a better life. And so it's okay to take from the Americans because supposedly America is such a wealthy country despite our tens of trillions of dollars in debt, so therefore it's justifiable. That's basically the argument.
Wow. I mean, as you can see here, the rabbit hole goes pretty deep. We're going to take a little break here where you can see how to get all the background into this rabbit hole, which again is so extensive when you look at the history, not just again of Europe, but even what's happening here in America and to this very day. So take a listen.
By exposing the dark side of a secret Jesuit organization, today's guest, Chris Pinto, is bound to create some controversy and even make some enemies along the way. But as Christians, should we be silent and allow evil and wickedness to prosper? You'll be shocked to hear about many of America's leaders, specifically politicians, who are deeply embedded in this Jesuit agenda. If you've never seen one of Chris's films before, you're missing out on one of the world's best researchers. His new DVD, American Jesuits, is available from Prophecy Watchers for your gift of $30 or more with shipping included anywhere in the USA. Call the toll-free number on your screen or visit the Prophecy Watchers bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees do apply and all prices listed are in US dollars. As always, we've put together a special package with 3 of Chris's most intriguing films, hours of deep research that blows the cover off of some very dark cover-ups and conspiracies. The Kinsey Syndrome documents how one man's sexual agenda destroyed the morality of America. The Untold History of the Bible takes us back to the days when the Catholic Church chained the Bible to the pulpit, refusing to allow it to be translated into English for the common man. Lastly, the True Christian History of America will examine the faith of the Pilgrims and how America was used by God to share the gospel with much of the world. All 3 films are available for your gift of $85 with a special bonus, a copy of Chris's new film, American Jesuits, a masterpiece that is sure to bring you up to speed on Satan's plans for the long-anticipated one-world religion. These 4 DVDs represent a $150 value, a savings of $65, plus free shipping. Prophecy Watchers exists to share the gospel with the whole world. Every week, we try to educate people on the things the Bible says about the world's future and, more importantly, your future. Challenging times lie just ahead, and we want you to be prepared for the events that will soon change our world forever. Thanks for watching today. Remember, Jesus is coming soon. Make sure you accept his free gift of eternal life.
Welcome back. We are here with Chris Pinto, and as you can see, this is a phenomenal study. It's fascinating, and again, it's very relevant. These things have not gone away. And Chris, what's your thoughts here? I mean, this is the first time we've had an American Pope.
Yeah.
And yet, but here's what's interesting about him is he's got dual citizenship. And so do you think that dual citizenship with Peru, again, a South American country, had any, contribution to him being chosen?
I believe it does, because the Jesuits are heavily involved in Peru and in these Latin American countries. I mean, those are countries where they've dominated for hundreds of years. And the term I learned from a Catholic writer a number of years ago, Latin American Jesuitism, is, I believe, what we're dealing with. I think this is the problem. The current Jesuit general, Arturo Sosa, from Latin America. Pope Francis was a Latin American Jesuit.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in part, they've chosen Pope Leo XIV, one, because they wanted this connection to Leo XIII, but two, his citizenship in Peru is another Latin American connection, and I believe they have a program to invade the country with millions and millions of immigrants and concentrate them in the major cities, and to systematically get control of the United States through mass immigration. And that this is a plan that goes back to the 1800s. Mm-hmm. And we find them very involved with today. So I believe that that is a big part of why they chose Pope Leo XIV.
Does it matter that he is Augustinian in his order rather than Francis was a specific Jesuit, but Leo is an Augustinian? It
could be, in terms of thinking of the Counter-Reformation, Martin Luther was an Augustinian monk. And so there may be a connection there that they see, okay, they're going to use an Augustinian monk to overturn, because they ultimately blame Luther for the reform, for the dismantling of the Holy Roman Empire, and all of the power that Rome lost over the last 400 to 500 years because of the Great Reform. But I would say to not just fellow Christians, but to people anywhere, we have to remember that the Reformation not only recovered the Bible and the true preaching of the gospel, but also things like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, private property, protections. All of those things were the offspring or the fruit of the Great Reformation. And Rome has always opposed those doctrines. I think that's why she developed social justice, socialism, and communism as a counter to
forced thievery.
Exactly, find ways to overturn what had been done through the reform.
Yeah. Chris, appreciate your time. And I wish we had more time to talk to Chris, but as always, time is short. But as you can see, all these things still are coming into play in our modern times. This is the goal of the enemy, to bring in a new world order. And we know it's very much in motion. It is not slowed down. It will come to be, prophetically speaking. We know that's the case. And so, again, Satan has a lot of emissaries out there throughout the ages in order to accomplish his goal. But we appreciate you watching this week. As always, thank you for your prayers and support for what we do here. The goal is to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ and let them know that he's coming soon. And we want people to be ready and to be rescued by all of his work. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Prophecy Watchers is a viewer-supported ministry made possible through the faithful support of friends like you. You can give easily by visiting prophecywatchers.com.